City Manager Lou Fox today told reporters he is satisfied that the two officers who shot and killed a 24-year-old black man back on the 6th of this month used sound tactics and proper procedure. Our police beat reporter Mary Walker says even though the city's investigation is over, the grand jury still has to make a final determination.
He did run into a...
City Manager Lou Fox first explained that police were justified in pursuing Michael Haskins last July 6 because his car was severely damaged in the rear and because Haskins had been weaving erratically. He said the car went through a fence, hit and damaged the house, and touched a parked car. Once the vehicle stopped, Fox explained what happened this way.
The officers next to the driver's or passenger side of the vehicle spotted a gun. Haskins attempted to pull the gun. Officer Gonzalez shot Haskins in the arm. In the next instant, Hernandez, who was covering Haskins from the rear, believing that Haskins had fired on the officers, then shot Haskins, and Haskins died.
Fox says the Haskins weapon was found on the floor of the car, apparently having fallen there after he pulled it from his waistband. Other points cleared up by the city manager today. Haskins was inside the vehicle when shot. The weapon belonged to Haskins, and Haskins was legally drunk. Those findings led Fox to conclude,
from an administrative standpoint, I'm satisfied that we acted properly.
The case now goes to the DA's office and the grand jury. The officers involved will remain on administrative leave until that probe is complete. Mary Walker, KSAT 12 News.
In Fort Worth today, a medical...
El administrador de la ciudad, Lou Fox, presentó hoy los resultados preliminares de su investigación de la muerte del joven Michael Ray Haskins, quien murió el 6 de julio después de que dos policías lo quisieron detener y le dispararon. De acuerdo a Fox, varios factores indican que no hubo abuso de autoridad por parte de los policías en este incidente. La investigación revela que Haskins estaba ebrio, que portaba un arma de fuego y que de hecho recibió 2 disparos de los policías cuando sacaba el arma de su cinturón para disparar en contra de ellos. Lou Fox también dice que la manera en que los oficiales se conducieron está totalmente de acuerdo con las reglas del Departamento de Policía.
We are convinced that the San Antonio police officers in this case used sound tactics, and they in fact used proper procedure, and from an administrative standpoint, I'm satisfied that we acted properly. That is not a judicial rendering.
El caso seguirá bajo investigación por parte de la Fiscalía del Distrito.
Good evening. The official word is now out. 2 San Antonio police officers were justified in shooting a 24-year-old man last weekend. The city has said the officers followed procedure. The 2 officers shot and killed Michael Haskins after they say he went for a gun.
Convinced that the San Antonio police officers in this case used sound tactics, and they in fact used proper procedure, and from an administrative standpoint, I'm satisfied that we acted properly.
Haskins' family was given the report after it was made public, and they still have some questions.
Our next step will be to formalize our concerns and present those to the district attorney's office.
Well, the investigation has now been turned over to the district attorney.
Good afternoon, everyone. For the first time since the controversy surrounding the San Antonio Police Department began, Police Chief Charles Rodriguez gave his side of the story today.
He cut short his trip to Washington for a hastily called news conference with a lot of reporters. Our News 4's Dan Cuellar was one of those asking a lot of questions, and he's now in the newsroom to tell us what was said. Dan.
Lori, despite an influx of very serious questions from a packed room filled with reporters, the chief remained relatively calm as he defended the practices of his department, and at the same time criticizing the police association for writing those letters that threaten legal action to those who make complaints against San Antonio police officers.
This department will at no time be compromised in terms of its integrity. That is not an officially approved procedure by this department.
As a matter of fact, the chief says, his office has sent a very firm letter to Police Association Attorney Joe Scuro, asking that the practice be stopped. On questions surrounding how Internal Affairs investigates cases, he says despite charges to the contrary, the division is doing an adequate job. On whether or not citizens should be placed on the Police Advisory Board, the chief says he sees no value in citizens taking part in that process.
The procedure that is currently there is adequate. It provides for checks and balances. It even goes to the extent of being able to, or having to, present any cases for review, serious cases, to the district attorney, and then to the grand jury.
And as to his decision to go against an advisory board recommendation that an officer accused of homosexual rape be fired, he says he is reviewing that case again.
Is this to suggest that you're having second thoughts about your decision?
No, I'm not having. I did what I did, and that's where it stands.
So the chief says he has no plans to change his mind on that particular case. He admits that despite having doubts about whether the incident ever happened or not, policy did not permit, nor did he feel it necessary to question the accuser, the boy, although he did take time to question the accused officer before making his final decision. Lori?
Dan, it's also my understanding that the officer in the case and the accuser both took the polygraph test. Did the chief say anything about that today?
He did. The chief says that while the boy passed his lie detector test and the officer did poorly on his, he does not believe in lie detector tests. And despite his uncertainty about this case, he decided to give the officer the benefit of the doubt and went ahead against the advisory board recommendation that this officer be fired. We'll have more on this story and reaction from City Hall at 6.
All right, Dan, thank you. Alan?
The police chief is back in town. Chief Charles Rodriguez cut his trip short to Washington, D.C., a few hours short anyway, and returned to San Antonio this morning. The chief says he's pleased with the way others in the department have handled several controversial issues while he was gone, but Yolanda Graham reports Rodriguez felt it was time to return and deal with some issues in person.
Just stand up, especially when it's going to get hot.
Police Chief Charles Rodriguez finally decided to talk sitting down. The chief says he came back from a seminar in Washington, D.C. early because he wanted to respond to several issues before this weekend. One controversial issue in the chief's absence has been letters like this that were sent from the police union's attorney to citizens who make complaints against officers. The letters threaten lawsuits against a citizen, and some feel this is intimidating.
It is not an officially approved procedure by this department. As a matter of fact, we are encouraging the association not to put out those letters.
But the chief says management in the police department has no control over what the police union does, and the chief is defending the way the Internal Affairs Office handles complaints. Right now, people making complaints against an officer do so by signing a sworn affidavit. The officer answers these complaints in person before an advisory board. One councilman already is suggesting that citizens have more input, but the chief disagrees and says nothing is wrong with the way complaints are handled now.
I don't think it would serve any value to have a civilian in disciplinary hearings. It is a policy of this department to be open to all citizen complaints concerning the policies, procedures, and actions of its employees.
Yolanda Graham, Channel 5, Eyewitness News.
Police Chief Charles Rodriguez is back in the city, and he says the Internal Affairs Unit, which he directs, is doing its job and doing it pretty well. His remarks come at a time when that unit is under fire from citizens who've been filing complaints against police officers. Many of them do not like letters that they sometimes receive from attorneys representing the Police Officers Association. Those letters threaten litigation unless complaints are dropped. But steps have been taken now to remedy that situation.
That is not an officially approved procedure by this department. As a matter of fact, we are encouraging the association not to put out those letters, and we have written their attorney a letter indicating such.
DA Sam Millsap has already expressed his dismay over the letters. Police Officers Association Vice President Joe Martinez says the issue most likely will be brought up at that group's next meeting coming up August the 6th.
The San Antonio Police Department continues to stand by one of its officers who is accused of sexually abusing a 15-year-old boy. When Police Chief Charles Rodriguez returned from Washington, D.C. this morning, he said he does not think there is enough evidence against the officer to show any criminal activity. The 15-year-old boy signed a sworn affidavit saying he had sexual intercourse with the officer during June of 1981. But Chief Rodriguez said after questioning the officer, he has doubts about the boy's statements.
I felt that there was no established proof and no substantiation to the point that I would say that I had to, or we should terminate the individual.
The chief says both the officer and the boy took polygraph tests. The chief says the boy passed his and that the officer passed one but did not do so well on the other.
Canal County.
El jefe de la Policía de San Antonio, Charles Rodríguez, criticó hoy a la Asociación de Oficiales de la Policía por evitar, o mejor dicho, por enviar cartas que amenazan con acción legal a las personas que entablan quejas contra los oficiales. En una conferencia de prensa, Rodríguez dijo que su departamento no aprueba la táctica y sugirió se ponga un fin al envío de dichas cartas.
No se debían de mandar las cartas, porque la gente siempre, yo creo que le da un poquito de temor y bueno, es una cosa que no debemos de hacer. Lo que estamos diciendo nosotros es que le mandamos una carta a la asociación diciéndoles que no era una cosa que debían de hacer. Y avisándoles que es una cosa que no pensamos nosotros que les va a ir bien con eso.
El fiscal Sam Millsap también ha criticado las cartas diciendo que intimidan a las personas que verdaderamente creen que han sido tratadas injustamente por la policía. La administración de la ciudad ha presentado al Consejo el paquete presupuestal para el año fiscal 1986, que sería puesto en efecto el próximo 1 de octubre. Mónica Navarro explica algunos puntos que son incluidos en este paquete presupuestal en el siguiente reportaje.
El presupuesto total presentado por el administrador de la ciudad, Lou Fox, indica una reducción de $13.3 millones del presupuesto total relacionado con el año anterior, como lo explica el subadministrador Alex Briceño.
Realmente el presupuesto total será todo lo que gastamos para servicios, lo que gastamos para nuestra deuda, lo que gastamos para proyectos de mejoramientos, va a ser reducido por $13 millones. Y es la primera vez en muchos años que se ha hecho más chico el presupuesto.
Efectivamente, algunos de los aspectos que incluye el presupuesto, si es aprobado, serían los siguientes. Un ambicioso plan para el mejoramiento de las calles y más de 600 millas de camino en la ciudad, incluyendo nuevas señales de tráfico con un presupuesto total de $17 millones. Por otro lado, un aumento de 65 centavos por mes en la recolección de basura. Para atacar el problema del crimen en San Antonio, se propone incluir $1.4 millones para contratar a 62 policías extras y otros 47 para poner en marcha el programa en contra de los delincuentes reincidentes. Además, otras 10 patrullas adicionales y un helicóptero.
Nos van a dar 48 que van a ser para el Repeat Offender Program. Nos van a dar otras 5 posiciones que van a ser para sargentos. Otros 10 posiciones que van a ser para patrulleros.
El concilio empezará a debatir el presupuesto presentado el 15 de agosto. Mónica Navarro para Reporter 41.
El concilio realizará una audiencia pública el próximo 27 de agosto para dar a conocer su decisión final respecto al paquete presupuestal para el nuevo año fiscal.
In other news tonight is the city manager trying to break up the police union. The new police association president, Harold Flamia, says yes.
We're trying to tell the people of this town they're getting cheated for their tax dollars on what's going on at the SAPD. And we've been trying to tell city government for 5 years, and the council and the mayor are not being informed on what's going on.
Flamia claims Lou Fox is working with Police Chief Charles Rodriguez to break up the police association, which is a union. He also says the department's management is not doing its job, forcing the association to step in. Rodriguez says that's not true.
I think what has happened is we've got a new association or union president, and he has to assert himself. He's got to make issues. He's got to make people know that he's there. Otherwise, why a union? You don't need a union unless there are issues. And you can create issues.
And that's what you feel he's doing?
Absolutely.
And this is just a red herring to cover up what I thought was a blunder on their part to intimidate people who felt that they had a grievance against an officer. So this is just a tactic as far as I'm concerned.
Now, Fox and Rodriguez say they approve of the union but want negotiation units broken up, according to Rank. As for the upcoming contract negotiations, the chief expects it will be a tough session because there are several very sensitive issues. Good evening, I'm Lori Tucker. Sharon Jones is on vacation.
I'm Dan Cuellar. Tonight, all those red-hot issues involving the police association could be coming to a head.
The association is going to meet in about an hour to discuss some of the problems that have been stirring up so much controversy over the past few weeks. And now it has yet another issue to discuss, the recent police department action against the association's attorney. News 4 reporter Beverly Hinton is in the newsroom now with the latest on this. Beth?
Yes, Lori, Joe Scuro, the police association attorney, has been in the news quite a bit lately, mainly for the letters he sent threatening to sue certain citizens who filed complaints the association felt were frivolous. Well, today he hit the news again, all because of this letter he received at the end of last month telling him he's no longer needed to teach in the police academy. It's a service he's offered for the last 2 years or so. It says Scuro has been replaced by the department's legal advisor. Now, this morning in his weekly press conference, Chief Charles Rodriguez told reporters Scuro was replaced primarily because his schedule was often too busy to teach. But he admits the flap over the association letters also had something to do with it.
There was some question about Scuro's position in terms of what he was doing out there with the association. I think that had something to do with it, yeah.
But Scuro does not buy that. He says this is just a blatant retaliation against the association.
That there's a lack of leadership coming out of the chief's office, and this is a perfect indication of it.
And you think that the association's getting close to it, so you were dismissed?
I believe that's probably what it is.
Now, I spoke to Chief Rodriguez by phone about that last comment from Scuro, and he said Scuro sounds pretty angry, but he says he has no other comment because Scuro is not part of the department. Now, the association has drawn up a grievance, and here it is, about Scuro being replaced by in the academy, and this should eventually wind up in City Hall. In the meantime, Scuro says he's going to continue to teach in other cities around the country, and he says he wouldn't be surprised to see some San Antonio police officers and brass in some of his classes. Lori?
Now, Beverly, of course, there is the Police Association meeting tonight, and because of all this controversy, including Scuro now, the latest, wonder what the general feeling is about this meeting.
Well, this is the association's regular meeting that it always has, and of course the police letter controversy will be a priority item. I've talked to some of the members of the association, and they tell me they're not happy with the association's new president, Harold Flamia. They say they think he has a personal vendetta against the city, and in his fight he's dragging the association's reputation down. Now, Flamia says the majority of people in the association don't feel that way. He says with any job, with anything you do in life, you're going to have people that are against you. He says he has no vendetta against the city, and he feels he's fighting for what the people say, the police officers say that they need to be changed. And he feels the meeting tonight is going to go very smoothly, no fireworks in his opinion. But some of the association members that I spoke to said they expect some fireworks, so we'll just have to see what happens.
All right, Beverly, thank you, and we'll have an update on that meeting tonight at 10.
Sure.
Commenting on that situation, the San Antonio Police Chief Charles Rodriguez says any profession which handles money, like cab drivers, is hazardous. And he says the department is doing all it can, short of riding in the cars with the cabbies, to ensure their safety. But he says, in the end, it is the responsibility of the cab companies to ensure drivers' safety.
The cab companies are a private concern, and we can help them do whatever they have to do in terms of providing information. But anything that is done to modify their vehicles, to add to their safety, has got to come from the cab companies.
Rodriguez suggests cab drivers look out for one another and possibly establish better lines of communication between drivers.
More problems between the Police Officers Association and the police chief. Now the attorney representing the police union has been told he cannot teach cadet classes anymore. Joe Scuro used to lecture on the law to classes on a volunteer basis. Now he's been told thanks, but no thanks.
Well, he was never hired, so how could he be fired? He donates his services. We decided that we could now use staff from the city attorney's office, and we have a city attorney who's going to be teaching that subject matter in his place.
Joe Scuro responded to his dismissal by saying, quote, "It was the act done by an insecure, petty, naive individual who purports to be a professional administrator." He accused the police chief of retaliation.
Some more problems between the Police Officers Association and the police chief. Now the attorney representing the police union has been told he can't teach cadet classes anymore. Joe Scuro used to lecture on the law to the classes on a volunteer basis, but he won't be doing it anymore.
Well, he was never hired, so how could he be fired? He donates his services. We decided that we could now use staff from the city attorney's office, and we have a city attorney who's going to be teaching that subject matter in his place.
Scuro seemed to take it personally. He responded to the dismissal by calling Rodriguez, quote, "an insecure, petty, and naive individual who purports to be a professional administrator," unquote. He also accused the chief of retaliation.
El jefe de la policía de San Antonio, Charles Rodríguez, dijo hoy en conferencia de prensa que la Asociación de Policía ha estado acusando falsamente al Departamento de Policía. Rodríguez agregó que el presidente de la Asociación de Policías es nuevo y quiere la atención de la comunidad para darse a conocer, pero lo está haciendo con acusaciones falsas.
Es una cosa exagerada y bueno, el presidente de la asociación es nuevo. Y bueno, se tiene que hacer él también muy visible, ¿verdad? Y pues lo que está haciendo es acusando al departamento de cosas que no han pasado.
Rodríguez también indicó que el abogado del sindicato de policías Joe Scuro fue despedido como entrenador de la Academia de Cadetes y será reemplazado por una mujer.
Ya tenemos una señorita, Mali Cavazos, que puede ser ella la maestra. Y bueno, queremos tener los instructores que sean de la ciudad.
Joe Scuro fue criticado enérgicamente en relación a las cartas que eran enviadas a la comunidad por parte de la Asociación de Policías.
Good afternoon. Police Chief Charles Rodriguez is saying now the problems that have surfaced in his department recently haven't necessarily been caused by the men in blue, but rather by news leaks on certain sensitive cases.
Yeah, that's right. But nevertheless, 2 police brutality cases are expected to be filed next week. Our Jibby Martinez is now in the newsroom to tell us more about it. Jibby?
Well, Alan, one of those lawsuits that will be filed stems from that much-publicized homosexual abuse complaint made 2 years ago by a minor against a police officer. Attorney Ruben Sandoval says he believes a lot of that information and evidence from the police internal affairs investigation has been destroyed. So he is asking the judge to turn over whatever information is still available. But a lot of privileged information is already known. And because of leaks, another attorney is avoiding internal affairs and instead is going to court.
Back in early June, 2 women were riding a Honda 3-wheeler in this northeastern neighborhood. Their attorney says a police officer stopped them for no apparent reason. One woman was arrested and is claiming rough treatment by the officer. Attorney Jack Pytel says even though he thinks he has a good case, he dropped his complaint in internal affairs because he says the process doesn't work. He points to the alleged homosexual abuse case in which the minor apparently passed the polygraph test and the accused officer later flunked it. The case did not go to the district attorney's office for further investigation, and the officer was given only a 10-day suspension.
Why should I insist that my clients submit themselves to the same process as others have in the past? Okay. If all we're doing is, sort of beating a dead horse, the end result will probably be the same.
The police chief has already defended his handling of the homosexual abuse case and is now concerned with the leaks in the Internal Affairs Office.
All of a sudden, we have people that have reports in their hands that are supposed to be confidential reports. how can we deal with confidentiality in the police department if there's a question of integrity?
Now, the chief says his department is looking into the leaks, but so far he is not blaming anyone for those leaks.
Jimmy, let's go back to the brutality case, if we could, for a moment. There seems to be a lot of attention on brutality cases these days. Is there an increase in brutality complaints?
No, there really is not. We received some statistics from the police department earlier today which show that they really are at about the same level that they have been over the last 2 years. The police chief says that the reason why there seems to be so much attention on the cases is because the news media is focusing on those cases.
Okay, Jimmy. Thank you very much. Lori.
Boy, you know it never fails. Come Friday nights, the police always get calls to handle trouble at many of our local bars. But the burden is soon going to be shifted back onto the bar owners to clean up their own business. Linda Wasserman reports now that a special committee is being formed to help them do just that.
Week after week, violence at local bars adds to the number of homicides in our city. Law enforcement agencies say some places may also be fronts for prostitution and gambling. But now, through a combined effort of everyone from the Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission, the police department, the DA, state representatives, and the sheriff's office, there's a plan to make taverns toe the line.
We don't argue that they have a right to exist, a right to a profit, and a right to be a good corporate neighbor. What we are saying, though, is that there are some responsibilities, there are some obligations that go along with this permit. It's a privilege, not a right, and you will be held accountable.
All bar owners are being sent a special invitation to attend a seminar next month that will show them their responsibilities and how they can spot trouble in the making. That doesn't mean there won't be any more shootings or stabbings in and around bars, but this new committee will keep an eye on the places that continue to have trouble, and if necessary, it will move to close them down to stop the bloodshed. Linda Wasserman, News 4, San Antonio.
State Representative Frank Tejeda is leading a crackdown on Southside restaurants and bars. Today, with District Attorney Sam Millsap and Sheriff Harlan Copeland at his side, and Police Chief Charles Rodriguez, TABC Chief Milton Brown, and Constable Ish Garza joining with him, the state representative announced not only stepped-up enforcement of Texas liquor laws, but a seminar to help establishments follow the law.
There are some obligations that go along with this permit. It's a privilege, not a right, and you will be held accountable. You will be held accountable by the community and certainly by the law enforcement officials.
Tejeda says the main reason for the new Get Tough policy is to curb violence at local bars. But the program will also help those who sell alcoholic beverages by teaching them how to follow the law and handle sticky problems like refusing to serve a patron who has had too much to drink.
You've heard enough about drinking and driving already to know it is a deadly combination. But Steve Andrews tells us local law enforcement officials have an eye on another killer.
You've seen these kinds of scenes on television news before. It may come as no shock to learn between 55 and 80% of all violent crimes are linked to alcohol. That's the statistic the district attorney, chief of police, the Bexar County sheriff, and Representative Frank Tejeda were throwing around today when they announced a joint effort to crack down on bar and club owners who turn their backs on liquor laws. The committee these people are talking about forming will monitor liquor selling establishments like bars, and they'll try and determine which of these places are the most flagrant violators of liquor laws. Incidentally, you already pay the San Antonio Police Department, the Bexar County Sheriff's Department, and a state agency to do just that. Chief Rodriguez says the police know of flagrant liquor law violators, but admits his department isn't focusing on enforcing liquor laws. And Sheriff Copeland is throwing his reserves at owners who'd rather make a buck than follow the law. And they both feed all their information to the Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission, which is supposed to crack down on violators.
Because of financial crunches, and I hold no one else responsible except we, the legislature, with a shrinking economy, with a shrinking pie, you know, they can only do so much. 17 TABC agents are responsible for policing more than 6,000 liquor-selling establishments. And now that the legislature has put the TABC in a David versus Goliath position, Tejeda wants bar and club owners to come together with police and the district attorney to help keep liquor law violators in line. Steve Andrews, KSAT 12 News Tonight.
Storm clouds are gathering at the San Antonio Police Department, and Police Chief Charles Rodriguez could find himself in the middle of the biggest crisis he has faced since taking over 2 years ago. Police Beat reporter Mary Walker is following the story.
Chief Charles Rodriguez's department earlier this month launched an investigation into evidence leaks that placed secret information about internal affairs matters into the hands of reporters. Now, it is reported that Rodriguez knew of a plan to sprinkle the sensitive information among members of the media. Some sources say the plan may have been aimed at discrediting the Police Officers Association, since it concerned letters sent to people who had filed complaints against officers. Those letters threatened citizens with legal action if they did not drop their complaints. But a police association spokesman says only 8 letters were sent over the years, and that most were sent only after the department had already exonerated the officer. Rodriguez is also under the gun for a personnel decision he made shortly after taking charge of the police department. A 15-year-old boy had accused a police officer of homosexually raping him. An investigative panel found that the boy's complaint was valid and recommended that the officer be fired. Rodriguez overruled and slapped the officer with a 10-day suspension. Rodriguez claims he'll take questions at a news conference tomorrow. He'll no doubt face some of the toughest questions he's seen. Later, he may face some even tougher ones, this time from a Bexar County grand jury investigating the teenager's rape claim. Mary Walker, KSAT 12 News.
And the district attorney's office today confirmed that the grand jury has in fact subpoenaed all the records concerning that alleged case of sexual abuse. Assistant DA Mike Schill says all the records will be turned over to a Bexar County grand jury shortly.
The police department has responded to our subpoena. We have those records. We'll review them when we get the opportunity to do so, and at that time we will take whatever action is appropriate after review of those records.
Schill pointed out today that is not going to be a special grand jury. There is no special probe of the incident underway. One person who most likely will appear before the grand jury is attorney Ruben Sandoval. He is representing the youth who made those allegations against the police department.
Charles Rodriguez has always been a popular police chief at City Hall, so much of the top brass there is keeping quiet regarding the latest controversy. City reporter Kathy Teague is in the newsroom. Kathy, what is the attitude now these days?
Well, Deborah, right now City Hall is treating the situation with kid gloves. As one assistant city manager told me today, the action is going on at the courthouse, not here. Even though the kitchen is getting hot, City Manager Lou Fox is refusing to leave Charles Rodriguez's side, maintaining the chief was not out of line in picking suspension over firing for a police officer accused of homosexual activities with a boy. Also, the City Council refuses to talk about a lack of confidence in Rodriguez yet, saying next month's public hearing on police hiring practices will not involve personalities or possible criminal activities now making headlines.
I am not on a witch hunt. I am not pointing fingers at anyone, but I simply think that it's time for us now to know the truth, since it's all aired in the public.
But City Councilman Ed Harrington says the council may wind up questioning Rodriguez about the incident.
We're going to have to review it. We're going to have to look at his performance since questions have been raised. We're going to have to look at the hiring practices. But in context, all of that has to be done on a management level through the city manager's office, in open forum, look at it objectively, and not with some subjective motive behind our moves.
Possible motives deals with the less than ideal relationship Chief Rodriguez has with the San Antonio Police Association. Insiders say with contract talks less than 6 months away, the association may be behind much of the controversy. But several city council members say if the SAPOA is just trying to attack the credibility of Chief Rodriguez, it's not working. And in fact, Deborah, the entire department, they say, is suffering from a lack of confidence in the community because of some of these revelations.
Okay, Kathy, thank you very much.
More controversy for the San Antonio Police Department today. The grand jury is questioning the way the department handled a case. Ann Wheeler has the latest.
Attorney Ruben Sandoval has accused San Antonio Police Chief Charles Rodriguez of abusing his authority. His complaint goes back to an incident that occurred 2 years ago in 1983. At that time, Sandoval's client, a 15-year-old boy, was living with a San Antonio police officer and his wife. The teenager claims the police officer sexually abused him and stole his Social Security money. The police department investigated the complaint and recommended that the police officer be suspended indefinitely. But newly appointed Police Chief Charles Rodriguez didn't act on that. He suspended the officer for 10 days for being outside his district. And apparently the sexual abuse charge was never forwarded to the district attorney for investigation. Today, the DA's Special Crimes Chief said that the grand jury is investigating to see if the sexual abuse and theft charges have any merit. The DA has also subpoenaed all of the police records. Mike Schill is also checking reports that the officer may have confessed to the allegations back in 1983. But Schill says at this time, he's not investigating the police chief for misconduct.
I don't see any criminal intent by anyone on failing to report a crime, if in fact a crime was committed. You know, that's a subjective matter. It's just police, when they get cases before them, have to make judgments.
Late this afternoon, Ruben Sandoval filed a lawsuit demanding that all of the paperwork in the case be turned over to the district attorney.
There's so many things that so many people did wrong that it's hard to pinpoint just the chief. But I think that ultimate responsibility lies with him. And I need to know, and we need to know, and my client wants to know what were the basis or the reasons or rationale for changing, felony violations into an administrative violation when that was not even the subject of the complaint originally.
Ruben Sandoval says that he's been invited to appear before the grand jury, and he says his client, who's now in the Navy, is also willing to come back to San Antonio and testify. Prosecutors don't know if they'll be calling the police chief before the grand jury, and meanwhile, the police officer who's involved in the middle of all of this controversy remains on active duty. And Wheeler, Channel 5, Eyewitness News.
San Antonio Police Chief Charles Rodriguez says he gave one of his officers the benefit of the doubt. The chief has been in the hot seat ever since it was disclosed he gave a police officer accused of sexual abuse a 10-day suspension instead of firing him. The allegations were made 2 years ago. This morning, the chief said he didn't fire the officer because the sexual abuse charges couldn't be proven. This is despite the fact that the officer investigating the incident found that the allegations did have merit and recommended that the officer be suspended indefinitely.
Misconduct. I think you have to keep in mind that I did not make the decision on the criminal charge. I made a decision on the discipline based on the additional information that I received. Now, if you can tell me that that's misconduct, then you're welcome to it.
Chief Rodriguez said the officer in the middle of the controversy has never confessed to any sexual misconduct. But attorney Ruben Sandoval, the man representing the alleged victim, says the officer has confessed. Sandoval has filed a lawsuit seeking all the paperwork in the case. The district attorney is also investigating the sexual abuse charges. A 3-year-old
San Antonio Police Chief Charles Rodriguez says his office did notify the DA's office that a teenager had complained of possible sexual abuse by a police officer. That was 2 years ago when the then 15-year-old boy made the charges. Rodriguez at a news conference told reporters he wanted to clarify questions concerning allegations that he acted improperly when he only suspended the officer for 10 days. The chief says he was presented evidence and made a decision only on a disciplinary charge, not a criminal one. And in terms of the disciplinary charge, he says he gave the officer the benefit of the doubt.
There was some information there that indicated that this young man had gotten himself in some trouble, regardless of what his scholastic background is. Been getting himself into trouble. He had been using drugs and was having problems in that respect. The other part of this is that the young man, when he was unable to get his money back, had threatened the police officer in getting even.
Rodriguez says the teenager had accused the officer of taking his Social Security checks and not giving him the money. The teenager's attorney, Ruben Sandoval, yesterday named the chief and the police department in a lawsuit for dismissing and not prosecuting the officer for rape.
Good evening, everyone. San Antonio Police Chief Charles Rodriguez tried to clear the air today over the latest controversy in the police department, a controversy that he is right in the middle of.
But when the dust settled today, there were still a lot of questions concerning the case of an alleged homosexual abuse of a teenager by a police officer. Beverly Hinton has been following this story. She is in our newsroom right now. Beverly, what did the chief have to say in that news conference today?
Well, Lori, basically the chief was trying to defend his position in this controversial case and shed some light on how the case was handled by the department. The chief spoke out for the first time today since he's come under fire for dealing what some say was an easy hand against police officer Milton Barrera. Now, 2 years ago, a San Antonio youth charged Barrera sexually abused him, and nothing came of his charges. But Rodriguez says the youth charges were reported to the district attorney's office, which found no basis for a sexual abuse charge. Secondly, the chief claims there's no verbal confession to the alleged abuse charges as charged by the youth attorney who filed suit yesterday. That's when the chief explained the department's action in this case.
When we came to the point where there was some criminality alleged by this young man, the internal investigation part of it stopped. And that is when the district attorney's office was contacted, and it was ascertained that there was no criminality. The Internal Affairs Office continued with this investigation, as is our normal procedures, ending in a hearing board for the officer, and a recommendation made by the hearing board on a disciplinary matter, not criminal charges, on disciplinary involving misconduct.
Now, that involved another matter, violation of police procedure. As for the abuse charges, the chief revealed there were polygraph tests. Results showed the youth passing while the officer failed one, but passed a second one. The chief says based on those results, he was at a stalemate. And he says he gave the officer, Barrera, the benefit of the doubt in the accusations and only ruled on violation of the police procedures. As it stands now, the grand jury is looking into the whole case, and it could be weeks before we have a decision on this controversy. Lori?
Beverly, something interesting that came out of that. What does the DA say about the police chief's claim that he did indeed report this case, this homosexuality case, to its office?
Well, right now the DA's office has no comments on any of this until the case is done through the grand jury, until the grand jury is finished with the entire thing. But there was some question raised during the press conference. We asked the chief of who made the phone call about to the DA's office. He told us, but he was unable to tell us who the person from the police office spoke to in the DA's office. So there was no written report to the DA's office, and there's no way to follow that up, no official reports. Lori?
All right, Beverly, thank you very much.
Okay.
In the meantime, whatever the problems may be, the police chief is still in good standing with the city council members that we talked to today. Council members Dutmer, Thompson, Harrington, Archer, and Wing say the chief is doing a good job, although Wing says the chief could have been a little more upfront earlier in explaining the controversies. Thompson justifies the chief's handling of the alleged homosexual abuse case by saying the chief was new to the job when the incident was brought to the chief's attention. Now, Archer says the media is manufacturing the controversies, but all agree that the uproar is definitely hurting the police department's image in the community.
San Antonio Police Chief Charles Rodriguez faced some tough questions from reporters today, just one day after a local attorney filed a lawsuit against him and his department for alleged misconduct in failing to prosecute a rape case. KSAT 12 Police Beat reporter Mary Walker says the chief spent much of the time explaining a decision he made almost 2 years ago when he gave a 10-day suspension to an officer accused of sexually abusing a teenage boy.
Chief Charles Rodriguez says the officer was the teenager's legal guardian at the time and was receiving Social Security checks to support the boy. The teenager's initial complaint accused the officer of keeping all the money from those checks. A police internal investigation concluded there was no theft involved. Soon after that ruling, Rodriguez says a sexual abuse allegation surfaced.
Been getting himself into trouble. He had been using drugs and was having problems in that respect. The other part of this is that the young man, when he was unable to get his money back, had threatened the police officer in getting even.
Lie detector tests given to the officer and his accuser showed both were telling the truth. Rodriguez said he had a stalemate and had to go with what was provable. He claims the department then contacted the DA's office to look into the matter.
Apparently, the district attorney's office felt that there was no basis for a sexual abuse complaint at that time.
Rodriguez says his decision to suspend the officer was based only on a breach of police procedure and not on any criminal charges. The chief believes the grand jury looking into the teenager's claims will find no wrongdoing. Mary Walker, KSAT 12 News.
For the fish. San Antonio Police Chief Charles Rodriguez says that he gave one of his officers the benefit of the doubt. The chief has been in the hot seat ever since it was disclosed that he gave a police officer accused of sexual misconduct a 10-day suspension instead of firing him. The allegations were made 2 years ago. This morning, the chief said he didn't fire the officer because the sexual abuse charges could not be proven. This was despite the fact that the officer investigating the incident found the allegations did have merit and recommended that the officer be suspended indefinitely.
That there was misconduct. I think you have to keep in mind that I did not make the decision on the criminal charge. I made a decision on the discipline based on the additional information that I received. Now, if you can tell me that that's misconduct, then you're welcome to it.
Chief Rodriguez said the officer in the middle of the controversy has never confessed to any sexual misconduct, but the attorney, Ruben Sandoval, the man representing the alleged victim, says the officer has confessed, and he has filed a lawsuit seeking all the paperwork in the case. DA Sam Millsap is also investigating the sexual abuse charges.
Por otro lado, en una conferencia de prensa, el jefe de la policía, Charles Rodríguez, afirmó hoy que el gran jurado está investigando el caso de un oficial de la policía que supuestamente robó y violó a un joven menor de edad. Respondiendo a las preguntas de la prensa, el jefe Rodríguez dijo que su decisión original de disciplinar al policía por medio de una suspensión es justificable, ya que hasta ese entonces el policía aún no había sido acusado formalmente ni encontrado culpable de ningún delito. Por su parte, el abogado que representa a la supuesta víctima continúa hoy sus procedimientos legales. Ayer Rubén Sandoval entabló una demanda contra el Departamento de la Policía y esta tarde Sandoval dijo que parte del problema se debe a que el jefe Rodríguez rehúsa aceptar su error en este caso.
No quiere admitir que hizo un error y el jefe de policía, y entre más grande se pone esta cosa, se empeorece la cosa. Se empeorece porque andan queriendo tapar la verdad y siguen ocultando la verdad, y entre más lo siguen haciendo, peor se pone la cosa.
Otro.
Based on what he knows about the case, Mayor Henry Cisneros says he does not think Police Chief Charles Rodriguez can be accused of wrongdoing. Rodriguez is under fire for suspending an officer accused of molesting a 15-year-old boy, rather than following an Internal Affairs Advisory Board recommendation to fire him. Cisneros was on vacation when the controversy flared, yet says after talking with the chief, he can't be criticized.
We all go through periods of white water, rough water, and the test of a person's leadership is sometimes manifest in those moments as much as in periods of smoother management.
Cisneros believes the police department is going through rocky times right now, but says when the dust settles, the department's reputation will not be damaged.
En una conferencia de prensa que se llevó a cabo esta tarde, el alcalde de la ciudad, Henry Cisneros, afirmó que se ha logrado mucho progreso en los proyectos que han sido diseñados para impulsar el desarrollo de San Antonio. Refiriéndose a las recientes críticas contra el jefe de la policía, Charles Rodríguez, el alcalde defendió al jefe Rodríguez diciendo que ha sido el mejor comandante de la policía que haya tenido esta ciudad y apoyó al alcalde.
Tuvo entonces y con lo que supo entonces, yo creo no es una decisión culpable, no es algo en que tiene liabilidad personal o profesional, y yo sigo en mi respeto y aprecio por el esfuerzo de nuestro jefe de policía.
El jefe Rodríguez recientemente ha sido criticado por no haber despedido a un policía que ha sido acusado de robo y violación.
Well, as for the city's top law enforcement officer, he's getting nothing but praise from Mayor Henry Cisneros. We've been hearing a lot about problems in the police department, including the alleged homosexual abuse case involving a police officer. Police Chief Charles Rodriguez has received criticism for not firing the officer and for not reporting the incident to the Human Resources Department. The mayor returned to work after a week-long vacation, firmly in line behind the chief, saying the current controversies haven't hurt the chief or the department.
I think the chief is holding steady, and he is held in very high regard in the community. I will tell you from my personal observations at events all over the community, and in fact some analysis of it, that the chief is one of the most respected figures in San Antonio.
Well, referring to the department's reputation, the mayor says citizens in a clutch situation will still rely on the department to do a good job, and that's what counts.
Según cifras del Departamento del Censo, aproximadamente el 54% de la población de San Antonio es de origen hispano y la mayoría de ese segmento de la población prefiere hablar en español. No sorprendentemente, el jefe de la policía, Charles Rodríguez, ha propuesto pagar extra a los oficiales de la policía que utilizan el español al desempeñar sus funciones durante las horas de trabajo. El jefe Charles Rodríguez dice que esto es necesario para compensar a los oficiales que tienen un talento especial y que lo utilizan al desempeñar sus funciones.
La cosa es no porque sean bilingües, sino si se está usando la lengua, aunque sea, si sea español o si sea alemán o lo que sea, cualquier idioma. Si se está usando en el trabajo, es una cosa que se puede ver, a ver si es necesario darles compensación así.
En ciudades como Los Ángeles, los policías bilingües ya reciben compensación adicional. Una entrevista completa con el jefe Charles Rodríguez la puede ver el lunes en el programa En San Antonio.
This is News 4 San Antonio at 5.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alan Himberger. Lori Tucker has the day off. The FBI has been asked to investigate the San Antonio Police Department, but right now it is not saying whether it's going to get involved. Jimmy Martinez tells us from the newsroom right now that the case involves the alleged case of homosexual activity against the charge against a San Antonio police officer. Jimmy?
Well, Alan, city officials are saying today that there is no basis for federal investigation into the police department. But Attorney General Jim Maddox apparently thinks differently. At the urging of the American Civil Liberties Union, Maddox took a look at the sex abuse case and decided it was a job for the FBI.
Reyes Ruiz has accused a police officer of homosexual abuse. The accusation was made 2 years ago, but the investigation apparently never left the police department. Maddox wants the FBI to find out why the suspected child abuse case was not reported to state authorities as required by law, and also why Police Chief Charles Rodriguez gave the officer a 10-day suspension instead of firing him as recommended by an internal review board. The police chief welcomes the investigation.
Whenever we have continuous focus on what is perceived to be problems, and it's been my experience that perhaps an outside agency should do it.
The chief acted appropriately. He had to make a judgment. I personally don't believe that we've been involved in the violation of anyone's civil rights.
If such an investigation occurs, it's not clear now that it will, but if it occurs, then we will cooperate to the fullest in an effort to make the case that our department is an adequately functioning, well-managed department.
Now, given that the chief was only on the job for a couple of months when he was asked to make a decision in the case, the mayor says the chief did the best he could. And he says that the chief will probably handle similar cases more carefully now that he's had some experience. But the mayor had trouble answering when asked if he thought homosexuals should be allowed to serve as police officers. After thinking about it a few seconds, the mayor replied he would have to look at the experience at other police departments. Alan?
Jimmy, what's the bottom line to this? Is the FBI going to get involved?
Right now, they don't know. They say that
they may not even have jurisdiction in this case because what they look for are civil rights violations. And from what they have heard so far in this case, they do not believe that there have been civil rights violations here. However, they want to look at and see what Maddox is sending them before making a final decision.
Okay, Jimmy, thank you very much.
Eyewitness News, San Antonio's top-rated newscast.
Thanks, Lisa. Sure. Finally, with the Labor Day weekend coming up, Police Chief Charles Rodriguez took to the airwaves this afternoon to remind people not to drink and drive, and he had some dramatic help in getting that point across. Radio talk show host Carl Wigglesworth volunteered to get drunk on the air to show just how out of control one can get, and he did a great job. The chief and 3 officers helped Wigglesworth to 9 ounces of 80-proof vodka in just over an hour and a half. And while it took more than another hour for him to register as legally drunk, he was definitely out of control long before that.
It's 3:19, Carl Wigglesworth. I can tell that when I speak, I don't know what I've said as soon as I've said it. And yet people get in a car and drive like this, is what you're saying.
For an individual like that to get out there and get in his car and drive off feeling great, in essence, is really a tremendous hazard.
The breathalyzer is no indicator at all because I'll tell you the truth, I'm drunk. I'm in no shape to drive a car.
Again, Wigglesworth had 9 ounces of vodka, and the officers say it took longer than they expected for him to become legally drunk, probably because he had a big lunch. By the way, he was driven home, and right now is sleeping it off. We hope.
He braved home, I think.
Eyewitness News, San Antonio's top-rated newscast.
Time for a look at tonight's newsreel. Yep. WOAI radio talk show host Carl Wigglesworth usually doesn't drink much, but as a lesson to his listeners, he got drunk today, knocking back 9 ounces of vodka. How's he look, huh?
Things appear to be going downhill.
No doubt. Carl did this with Police Chief Rodriguez serving him to warn people about driving after drinking over Labor Day. Carl was legally drunk by the end, but he'll recover.
We think he'll be fine.
But he might not have if he'd driven home. Instead, co-worker Johnny Marks took him. Did he smell much like alcohol, huh?
I tried to hold my breath and run until I get outside.
Good move. Well, meanwhile, city council members got a shot of magic today from members of the Texas Association of Magicians. For instance, you know that rope is cut in 3 pieces,
which is now being joined together.
This rope trick is an observance of Magic Week in San Antonio. My wife does a trick with credit cards. She makes my paycheck disappear, right?
I'd never seen done before, but that's what she wanted to do.
Well, yeah, meanwhile, let's go to the festival in Buñol, Spain, where each year local residents smash tomatoes into each other's faces.
In a compassionate way.
Certainly. They raise millions of tomatoes in the area, and by this time of year, they're sick enough of them to want to crush them. How do you throw without getting hit yourself, anyway?
It's a difficult problem.
But there's no doubt lunch all across Buñol today was tomato surprise. In fact, after my last remark, it's what my wife will hit me with tomorrow, probably.
I'd never seen done before, but that's what she wanted to do.
Well, in Spain, it looks like fun. That's Eyewitness Newsreel, and that's Eyewitness News. Good night.
How are y'all doing?
Well, we're doing terrific, and we're very excited about the project, and we've got such a terrific array of celebrity conductors and celebrity judges, which the police chief is representing our judging panel, that we're just terribly excited. We think it's going to be a terrific show.
Well, basically, let's refresh the memories of those folks that may not have caught the other programs and tell them what's happening with the Symphony Olympiad and what it is.
Well, basically, we're simulating an Olympic competition. And we have 9 celebrity conductors and 6 celebrity judges, and none of which are musical. And the conductors have to get up in front of the orchestra and conduct a selection or a piece of music of their choice. And then our celebrity judges rate them, like the Olympics, you know, hold up cards, 5.6, whatever. And it's a real fun kind of project, and to be quite honest about it, the format is that we're having a subscription campaign, season ticket sales to the symphony, and you can phone in and you can order all your tickets right on the show.
Right.
And we're giving you a little entertainment watching some of the top community leadership support the symphony.
Well, Charles, how do you feel about being involved as a judge? I mean, how musically talented are you?
Well, I couldn't say that I'm musically inclined or talented, but you know, when I got called on this, initially I was going to be a conductor, but somewhere along the line we got our signals crossed, and I was, I think they had Reverend Buckner take my place, so I'm kind of put out over that.
Oh, well,
really.
you'll get over. I tell you
what.
Excuse me, my mic just fell off. I'm sorry. Let me talk into my mic here. When Buckner gets up there to conduct, are you going to give him a good score?
I'm going to be one of the judges.
Buckner, you better watch out if you're listening.
So I'm going to be a judge, and I feel real pleased. I think this is a tremendous event, and I was very pleased that they called me to participate. Next year I'll be a conductor.
All right, if we do this again next year, do you think there's a chance we would do this again? What do you think, Carlos?
It depends on the success this time. We're anticipating a very tremendous response from the community, just based on the format and the kind of entertainment we're offering. And so if it's really as successful as we anticipate,
Just
if
maybe.
Channel 4 would like to do it again, we'd be delighted.
Well, Channel 4 is real excited about being involved. Tomorrow morning, we'll be talking to Lori and Alan. Lori Tucker, Alan Hemberger, our 5 o'clock and 10 o'clock anchors, who will be the main hosts of the program that will be presented at 8 o'clock tomorrow evening. So we're real excited. I get to work with George McKenzie in the phone area, and Rick Lozano will be working with the judges. So we're real happy to be a part of this support effort for the symphony. Thank you both for being here this morning. Best of luck to not only the symphony, but to you as a judge, Charles. Thanks for dropping by. Thank you for being with us this morning on Today in San Antonio. We'll see you tomorrow when Lori and Alan tell us about their involvement with the symphony. Bye-bye for now.
As the silver medal winner.
Yes, and now we are proud to announce the gold medal winner of the 1985 San Antonio Symphony Olympiad, Reverend Buckner Fanning. What was your secret?
A lot of prayer and a lot of good friends.
Those two combinations, that works all the time, doesn't it?
It's just great to be a part of a thing like this, and we're fortunate to have this symphony and these master singers in San Antonio, and I'm honored to be a part of this. We all are, and God bless you all for doing it.
Well, I bet you feel like saying hallelujah right now.
That's right. That's right, and I know I'm supposed to be a preacher, not a conductor of an orchestra.
Let's give a little round of applause for our judges tonight. Let's go to the judges. Stand up, please. Chief Rodriguez, Roddy Stinson of the Express, Cappy Lawton, Elaine Princey, and Maestro James Sedaris. Thank you all very, very much.
We also want to say a big thank you to all the volunteers with the Symphony, the Junior League, everyone, the folks who worked on the stage, the camera crew, everyone who had a part in this first for our city and for our symphony, hopefully not the last.
Certainly, hopefully not the last. And maybe next year we can compete too. Wouldn't that be fun? We kind of missed out on all the fun here tonight.
Maybe, funny.
Funny, well, why not? Again, don't forget that telephone number. It's still up there. You can still get in on some of these great symphony packages. The number again, 735-5000. We have had a super time
We really
here
have, and we are ending on
735-4000, as the crowd here announces to me. 4,000 is the last
Right, 350 subscriptions that we've gotten so far.
Fantastic, fantastic.
It's been wonderful. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. We'll see you again soon.
The 1985 San Antonio Symphony Olympiad has been a special presentation of KMOL-TV and the Symphony Society of San Antonio.
This is News 4 San Antonio at 5.
News 4 has learned this afternoon that the U.S. Justice Department currently has 7 investigations underway on official police misconduct and civil rights violations by the San Antonio Police Department. Sources at the Justice Department tell our Dan Cuellar the alleged violations date back as far as March of 1984. The SAPD has been under fire recently after the police chief, Charles Rodriguez, ordered a number of records on police internal affairs investigations destroyed. A Bexar County grand jury is presently looking into a case in which a minor was allegedly the victim of a homosexual rape by a San Antonio police officer. The officer received a 10-day suspension. Mayor Cisneros and City Manager Lou Fox have not been available for comment, but Assistant City Manager for Police Affairs Bill Donahue says he is surprised by the probe.
Suggest that the presence of an investigation presumes that there is a need for correction or that there is not. An investigation means it is just that.
As for Chief Rodriguez, he says he was unaware of any official investigation by the Justice Department and therefore has no comment.
This is News 4 San Antonio, the Weekend Report.
When you're having a night on the town and you decide to stop in at a local bar, the last thing you want to see is violence. It is the same with these folks. They are bar owners from the southwest side of the city. And about 90 of them showed up for a meeting with State Representative Frank Tejeda today, along with a group of lawyers, police officers, and politicians. The message that violence in bars won't be overlooked.
I would venture to say that many of you allow things to occur in your establishments primarily because you know the police aren't going to be around right away, so it doesn't really make that much difference. Well, let me assure you that we will be around, and we're going to focus very, very intensely on that problem.
Over the past years, violence in bars on the rise, and thanks to pressure from a more aware public, officials are holding these sessions to try and find a solution to the problem.
Serving San Antonio and South Texas.
Well, rising violence in San Antonio bars has turned State Representative Frank Tejeda into a crusader. Tejeda held the first in a series of meetings with local bar owners today in an attempt to cut down on bar problems. Our Richard Noriega has details.
106 invitations were sent out to Southside bar owners, and a majority of those were concerned enough to attend this first of several meetings planned in order to educate them on how to deal with problems in their establishments, problems that could result in the loss of their liquor license.
If there's no compliance with responsibilities and obligations and the law, the only signs that will be posted will be closed signs.
Among the things discussed were new state laws that take effect September 1st of next year.
If a shooting or stabbing or drug-related offense or violent offenses occur, then after a short investigation, the permit or license can be suspended for a period of 7 days while we are completing the investigation for further action.
Coalition members include Police Chief Charles Rodriguez, City Councilman Frank Wing, and County Commissioner John Longoria. All stressed the importance of being familiar with the law, as well as the proprietors' responsibilities to the community and to their customers. Studies conducted over the past 25 years indicate a definite correlation between alcohol and violence. Today's forum will no doubt be duplicated in other parts of the city.
My office has had many calls from people in different parts of the county and in the city saying we need something for our part of town.
Tejeda says he's pleased with today's turnout, and most of the bar owners we talked to were equally pleased.
I think that it's a really good program, and I'm all for it. And me being in the business, I'm highly concerned about DWIs and violence in bars.
Barroom violence and drunk driving are two problems that saloon owners seriously want to do something about. And although they know they'll never be able to eliminate them completely, at least steps are being taken to lower their incidence. Richard Noriega, KSAT 12 News Tonight.
On the west side of San Antonio feel they're being shortchanged when it comes to police protection. The fact is, the whole city is. News 4's Barbara Bedrick examines what's keeping San Antonio's boys in blue in short supply and the city with its hands full of crime.
A male in a tan Mustang, possible burglars in action.
Fighting crime is big business in San Antonio, with 80 patrolmen rolling on the streets by day and 124 patrolling by night. Even then, it is not enough.
It took the policeman an hour and 45 minutes to respond to my call. I'd like like to know why it took so long.
Westsiders charging again last night. They need more and faster police protection. The head of the Boys in Blue believes crime's no worse there than on the north or east side, but it is more life-threatening.
Those are crimes you can't predict. Those are crimes that you can't really, unless you eliminate the bars and eliminate the drinking, there's no way to control that.
With its new budget effective in October, the city will pick up about 30 new patrolmen, but they'll take 6 months to train. Even when the new patrolmen hit the streets to fight crime, the city's police force won't be up to par, and the chief of police admits it may never be.
The unfortunate thing is that the city is growing so fast that unless we commit a tremendous amount of resources to adding manpower to this department, I don't know how long it's going to take for us to catch up.
The FBI standard for police is 3 officers for every 1,000 persons. San Antonio has 1.4. But the chief claims the standard is not realistic, and it may not apply to San Antonio because no city is alike in its makeup or its criminals. Barbara Vedrick, News 4, San Antonio.
All right. We'll go now to the Meritorious Citizen Award. This is an award given to Mr. and Mrs. Raymond Longoria. You remember several months ago that we talked about how we have an award that we give to persons who are on the city staff who have been involved in an act of particularly conspicuous courage. But we didn't have anything where we would recognize a citizen who was involved in such an act of courage. Today we have an award called the Meritorious Citizen Award, which we will present to Mr. and Mrs. Raymond Longoria for rendering service in the apprehension of a driver involved in a hit-and-run fatal accident. I have the service award given by the police department to Raymond Longoria and to Mrs. Teresa S. Longoria. Would you please come forward? And is an official of the department? Yes, Chief. Would you please explain the facts of the case so that the council may know why this award is being given?
My pleasure, Mr. Mayor. On August the 1st, on August the 25th, the Longorias witnessed a hit-and-run accident at the intersection of Somerset and Briggs. This was the accident involving two teenagers that were struck by a vehicle on bicycles and had eventually there was one young man that was killed. The Longorias took it upon themselves to take some action, and I think this is very important. What happened is they chased the fleeing suspect vehicle and flagged down the police and helped in the apprehension of the suspect, and I think that's terrific. I think if we had more of that, we'd cut down on a lot of the fleeing suspects that leave the scenes of accidents, which is a very, very serious problem in San Antonio.
We have had a large number of instances lately where children or pedestrians, bicycle riders are hit by automobiles, and then the perpetrator drives away. Recent incident on the north side, and this one that you described, as well as several others. Obviously, one of the most reprehensible crimes that anyone could imagine. Leaving the scene of an accident, leaving someone hurt, and not having the decency even to render assistance. Too often, citizens who witness that simply don't want to be involved. We have instance after instance of people crying for help and no one coming out of their homes. Because, unfortunately, another aspect of life in the big city is that when someone does get involved, chances are they are going to suffer either some sacrifice of time as witnesses, or worse, be actually physically involved. Too many instances, the person who tries to break up a domestic dispute is the one who is shot. The person who tries to step in a fight is the one who is stabbed. The person who tries to break in a gang fight is the one who is maimed by an attack with a bat or a chain or some other blunt instrument. So it is an act of conscious courage when a citizen intrudes themselves into a situation such as this. These people, Mr. and Mrs. Longoria, did not know what that perpetrator might have had in his car. After having hit someone and hurt them, he might have had a sawed-off shotgun on his front seat. Could have had a handgun in his glove compartment. Could have had a knife when he jumped out of his car. But they didn't think of that. what they thought of is apprehending someone who had just blatantly violated the laws of this city. And as such, they performed a high act of courage. And on behalf of the city of San Antonio, and particularly the police department, it is a pleasure to present this meritorious award of the City of San Antonio Police Department, awarded to Raymond Longoria and Teresa Longoria for actions taken on August 25th, 1985, in an effort to assist the City of San Antonio Police Department in making this city a safer place to live. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for being the citizens that you are. Thank you for the example that you have set. Tell the folks where you were and what you saw and how it happened. I think it's important, not because we're celebrating just you as individuals, but I want the cable audience and the rest of the folks out there to know the circumstances under which these things happen. You know, you're driving down the street and there's no, writing on the wall that says, now's your chance for courage. It isn't that way. It's just a nitty-gritty, dirt-down situation that we live through, and suddenly you got to make an instantaneous decision. Are you going to help? Or are you going to run? And the instinct has got to be fear. The instinct, the adrenaline, what do they call it? The flight instinct that human beings have in them. But they overcame that with thought and got involved in the situation. And I think folks need to know what your thoughts were at that instant, so they can rethink. They can rethink that situation for themselves if it ever comes up. Go ahead.
I would like to say that when I saw what was happening.
Tell us what was happening.
Okay, we were going home at about 10 o'clock at night, and we saw a lot of dust in the road, and then we saw to the left of us that there was this truck coming on, and there were some kids on a bicycle. And the truck hit the bicycle. One of the kids went underneath the truck, and we saw the kid actually go underneath the truck, and then we saw the man put the truck on park, and then he turned it to reverse, and he went over the little boy's body again. And then again he put it in drive, and he took off. And when we saw this, all I remember is my husband saying, we gotta get him. He just can't go on like that. So we went off.
You were going the opposite direction?
Right.
So you made a U-turn and followed him?
We followed him, and it looked like if he was gonna stop, because he turned it into an auto parts store, and he parked. And we got off the truck right away, but as soon as he saw that we were already off the truck, he got back on and he took off.
And how did you flag the police? Where did you flag the police, or how did you actually...
My husband dropped me off in this corner store, and I went to this house, and I rang the doorbell, and I told the man that there was an accident, that I needed to get the police involved with this.
What was he doing at the same time?
He was chasing the man.
Teamwork.
So then, what happened? Where did it come to an end?
At some Highway 16, at Highway 16 towards 14.
Right.
It stopped all there. Well, I flagged them down, you see.
You flagged the guy down?
Yeah, well, I was trying to, you see. I'm trying to avoid him from getting on the highway and leaving.
Right.
And then at that time, the police came and he offered that. Cut off.
Let me tell you, that country out there is dark and rough, too. You get out there on Highway 16 chasing some guy in a truck, you're taking your life in your hands. But thank you very much for what you did and the example that you set for our city. I think they deserve special recognition, and that's why we're providing it.
That's a tremendous husband and wife team there, Mayor.
That's right.
That's something.
I've heard of Cagney and Lacey and Heart to Heart.
This is Longoria and Longoria, right. By the way, Officer Middleton, who was the investigator, is the one that submitted their names for this. So even our investigative
officers here on this matter? Y'all want to say anything about this? Can you tell us any more about it? That's useful. Go.
Your Honor, Counsel, the man involved in this fatal hit-and-run accident been arrested 9 times at DWI in his lifetime. He has 6 convictions for DWI, and I've personally filed a case this morning with the District Attorney's Office for involuntary manslaughter of 1 count and failure to stop and render aid on the young man that survived the accident. Longoria's, had they not took it upon himself to pursue the individual involved in this accident, he might well have made his escape, and we may never to this day know who it was.
There was no evidence there was no way to get evidence from the bicycles on the paint or anything like that.
We have a license plate.
So it's their eyewitness account.
Their eyewitness account that has made this case Being presented to the district attorney's office.
And their travail is not over in that they will have to testify in the courtroom, I presume, on this case.
Yes, sir, they will.
And we, again, applaud you not only for the instant courage that you showed, but for the courage that's yet ahead as you take time from your work and your business to stand before the court and finger the person who's responsible. And that always takes a special courage, and again, can't thank you enough for what you've done and what you've shown.
Jim, there was a story in the paper this week about how a lot of these hit-run drivers are getting away on a loophole.
Yes, sir, that's in the registration law. You can sell a car to someone. The buyer has the responsibility to change the papers within 10 days to put the title in his name. Unfortunately, we have a problem where the buyers do not. They will in turn sell the car to someone else, in turn can sell it to another person, and it's still in the original owner's name. It can go 2 or 3 times. And the only time they'll catch it is when the license plate actually expires itself. We have a.
So how does that get a DWI or hit and run off the hook?
Well, because we can't find out who the owner was I sold it to. I think his name was so-and-so, and consequently I sold it for cash. I have no record who I sold it to, and it's virtually impossible to find him. We need a law similar to, I think, California, where the seller and the buyer.
So that makes it
both
hard
have
to
notified.
apprehend the person. It doesn't make it harder to prosecute them once you've got them.
No, it makes it hard to apprehend them.
Yeah, that's
correct.
That can be
Jim,
one of our
on this,
priorities
you
for
say this fellow had 6 convictions already?
Yes, sir.
And never a day of jail time?
Yes, sir. He did 180 days last year and a total of $500 in fine for 2 convictions he had last year.
The only time of the 6 convictions he...
No, sir. He's had convictions back in 1957, 63, 67, 73, where he spent 3 days in jail and paid a $50 fine.
That's something.
Thank you
Mr.
very
Mayor?
much. Yes, ma'am.
I would like to put this as a high priority on our legislative session for the next time around.
Okay. The next item we have is a meritorious service award handled in another case, and it is Meritorious Service Award to Mr. Joe Estrada. Mr. Estrada has presented an award for assisting in pulling a passenger from a burning vehicle. Mr. Estrada, would you please come forward and come up here also? And Chief, would you tell us the facts of this case?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, on August the 1st, Joe Estrada witnessed an accident on IH-35 and Poteet, Jordantown Road. A Chevrolet van involved in the accident contained 3 people. Mr. Estrada pulled one man from the van to safety, and as he did so, the van burst into flames. Fortunately, or unfortunately, the only person that was saved was the individual that Mr. Estrada pulled out of the van.
How many people were in it?
3.
Adults?
3 adults. Now, I think he took it upon himself to risk his life to do that. As you see, when he went in and pulled out this one individual, immediately after that, the thing burst into flames. And I think that takes tremendous courage, especially when you start seeing flames.
Yeah.
And we wanted to acknowledge this, Mr. Mayor.
Congratulations, and again, thank you for what you did. Tell us a little bit about your case yourself, if you'd like. Do you mind saying a word? Just, where were you when it happened?
I was on my way to work. Passing the overpass on 35 on Poteet Highway.
Right.
I just see a van run over has a light and hit a car. And just dumped the car out of the road, and the van just hit the center cord and twist. And I started running the sides, and then it was on fire.
It was on fire right away?
Yeah. And then just pulled over and ran. There was no windshield in front of the van, so I pulled one guy out.
Pulled him out through the front?
Yes,
The
sir.
van was on the side already?
Yes,
Laying down on its side?
Yes, sir.
So you pulled him out through the front?
Is he unconscious?
From the passenger side or the driver? Or?
Well, he was half conscious. And then I went back to take the other guy out. It was impossible because the flames of the van were already on front. I couldn't do anything about it.
And they were unconscious inside, or?
Yes, sir. Well, the guy I was trying to about a second, he was moving, but he wasn't screaming or nothing. He couldn't move. He was still alive.
They're probably pinned inside. Yeah. Officer, do you want to say a word about the case?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, City Council and Chief. If I might add just a little bit to the story, when I arrived at the scene, the fire was out. The other the lady that was hit by the van was already in EMS, but when I talked with Mr. Estrada, he had superficial cuts on his arm from the glass where he pulled the people out, and soot marks on his body. And I just think it's very brave of thing that he did. Offer my congratulations.
You're bringing it to our attention, and you're exactly right.
It was an extremely hot fire. The people were burned beyond recognition.
And you never know, when you get close to a burning vehicle, it is not going to explode, throw fragments, as well as actually sear you when it explodes. So it was an act of courage, and we're appreciative to you for bringing it to our attention, but especially appreciative to Mr. Joe Estrada here for the act that he undertook on that occasion. Thank you very much for what you did.
Mr. Mayor, just one last comment. It's interesting, the young man is a very shy individual, yet quick to act. Yep. And I think that's tremendously important.
Joe, where do you work? Where do you work now?
I work at Texas State Glass. I'm part-time. I work part-time. I'm a student at Lanier High School.
Oh, you're a student at Lanier, and you work part-time. Well, you're a senior. If you ever want to be a police officer, we got a slot for you.
Eyewitness News, San Antonio's top-rated newscast.
San Antonio Police Chief Charles Rodriguez spent several hours today testifying before the Bexar County Grand Jury. The grand jury is investigating the way the police department handled a homosexual assault complaint against a veteran officer. Rodriguez suspended the officer in question, even though others recommend he be fired. Today, the grand jury heard from the chief himself and the assistant city manager, Rolando Bono. The grand jury's term in that investigation has been extended for another 30 days.
This is News 4 San Antonio at 6.
The grand jury continued asking questions today about what happened to that internal affairs investigation by the San Antonio Police Department into alleged sexual abuse by one of its officers, Milton Barrera. Today, the grand jury heard from Police Chief Charles Rodriguez and from Assistant City Manager Rolando Bono, who has been the liaison to the police department during the original investigation. Now, News 4's Dan Quayer has learned from 2 independent sources that the district attorney's office is preparing at least 1 indictment. Officially, the DA's office is saying nothing.
Serving San Antonio and South Texas.
San Antonio's chief of police spent almost 2 hours testifying before a special grand jury here today. The panel is investigating allegations of sexual misconduct by a police officer and the way an internal investigation of those charges was handled. A month ago, Reyes Ruiz filed a civil suit making the same charges. He claims Officer Milton Barrera forced him into a homosexual relationship while he was a ward of the policeman. Ruiz was 15 at the time. The civil suit prompted a grand jury probe, and after testifying today, the chief wouldn't comment.
No, I can't tell you anything, really. Nothing that went on.
Sources say at least 6 other high-level city and police officials have been subpoenaed to testify. Assistant City Manager Rolando Bono also testified today, and his boss, City Manager Lou Fox, is reportedly among those subpoenaed to appear. Sources in the DA's office say criminal indictments in the case could be returned as early as next week.
Eyewitness News, San Antonio's top-rated newscast.
A San Antonio police officer was suspended without pay today after being picked up on theft charges. Isidro Martinez, a 12-year veteran of the police force, was booked for theft between $750,000 and $20,000. Chief Charles Rodriguez was careful in commenting to me about the case.
We have suspended Officer Martinez without pay. And because of the ongoing investigation and court action, there isn't too much more we can say about that.
Were the cases of theft not involved with his work?
Well, it did include some action while he was on duty. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which Martinez was released earlier today on $5,000 bond. The investigation was carried out by the district attorney's office.
Hoy por la mañana fue encontrada la pequeña niña de 4 años de edad, quien fuera secuestrada ayer por la tarde por un desconocido en las inmediaciones del fuerte Sam Houston. En conferencia de prensa esta mañana, el jefe de la policía, Charles Rodríguez, nos dio a conocer los detalles.
Miraron a una niña andando por el medio de la calle a las 7 de la mañana, que todavía está poquito oscurito, ¿verdad? Y pues hablando con ella, halló que era la niña que estábamos buscando y bueno, estamos muy contentos, que parece que nada le pasó, pero ahorita la están examinando en el hospital para ver si la molestaron sexualmente o si, bueno, a ver cómo está, ¿verdad?
Este tipo de crímenes se está viendo más frecuente. ¿A quién atribuye usted esto? ¿Al Departamento de Policía, que hay poca protección, o a los padres de familia que tienen poca protección de sus hijos?
Bueno, muchas veces las familias no tienen cuidado con los niños y no tienen pendiente porque no piensan ellos que algo les va a pasar.
Los investigadores buscan al sospechoso, que se cree manejaba un automóvil color gris.
Eyewitness News, San Antonio's top-rated newscast.
5 months of hard work is over for 25 police cadets, and now the new San Antonio police officers are ready to jump into some real work. It was graduation day for this police class. Now, this graduating class may be one of the most physically fit ever. 13 of the 25 scored perfect 500s on their physical training exam. All of the grads will get evening or nighttime assignments and will be placed on 6 months probation.
This is News 4 San Antonio at 6.
Today, the police chief did have his first public comment on the department's other big controversy, the Milton Barrera sexual abuse indictment. The chief says there's not enough evidence to convict the officer of sexually abusing a teenage boy, and he claims, in effect, the grand jury signaled its approval of the way he handled the case by returning an indictment only against Barrera.
And I think the fact that the grand jury looked at it and the only indictment they could make was Barrera, I think, says something.
But you may remember Rodriguez refused to fire Barrera, even though his own internal review board recommended he be dismissed. When asked at today's news conference how the indictment can be a signal he handled the case properly, the chief said, in his words, "Because that's my feeling on it."
Hablando del crimen, el Departamento de Policía de San Antonio, junto con aproximadamente 200 líderes de la comunidad de San Antonio, han presentado un plan para combatir el crimen que se comete en diferentes distritos de la ciudad. Según el jefe del Departamento de la Policía, Charles Rodríguez, el programa, llamado en inglés Community Interaction Policy, se pondrá en efecto el próximo año y va a ser muy benéfico para San Antonio.
Eso se está comenzando aquí en San Antonio para tener comunicación con gentes de los barrios, con gente de las áreas que tienen problemas.
Serving San Antonio and South Texas.
The San Antonio Police Department wants to take a chunk out of our crime statistics. Tonight, about 150 community leaders gathered to see what needs to be done about the increasing problem, the focus on what citizens can do.
Several things take place. One is that they'll see that we're concerned, that we're willing to make the effort, and that we're trying to be proactive in what we do in dealing with some of the problems in the various communities. And the other is, hopefully what we'll get out of this is that they'll be more aware that we are willing to help, and all they have to do is call.
Tonight's meeting kicked off the SAPD's Community Interaction Policing Program, or CIP. Rodriguez says the CIP plan will be developed and implemented through a series of neighborhood meetings just like this one. Tonight's was held in District 5, but over the course of the next 12 months, all 10 districts in the city will be exposed to the plan.
Eyewitness News, San Antonio's top-rated newscast.
The The attorney for Reyes Ruiz is asking the U.S. Justice Department now to step into the investigation of his alleged sexual assault. Officer Milton Barrera was indicted last week for sexually abusing Reyes in 1983. Since then, District Attorney Sam Millsap has said he doubts he can win a conviction in the case, partly because of insufficient evidence. Reyes attorney Ruben Sandoval calls Millsap's prosecutorial effort a wet noodle. Sandoval is also accusing Police Chief Charles Rodriguez of participating in a cover-up to help protect Officer Barrera.
Is cover his behind at the expense of my client, at the expense of the public's right to know the truth, and the expense of the public's right to expect honesty and straightforwardness and good law enforcement from one of its top officers. And I think it's time we made the chief accountable. Stop lying to us.
Sandoval calls Millsap's position that Reyes did not report the assault soon enough malarkey.
This is News 4 San Antonio at 6.
Meantime, San Antonio attorney Ruben Sandoval, who represents a young man who accused a police officer of homosexual rape, says he has met with an assistant U.S. attorney in San Antonio seeking a federal probe of the matter. Sandoval says, in addition, he has sent documents to the U.S. Justice Department and a number of U.S. senators and congressmen seeking their support and assistance. The attorney's actions come just a few days before an expected move by Officer Milton Barrera's attorney to have State Judge Ted Butler throw the case out.
Before, with all due respect to Judge Butler, what he does or doesn't do is not going to deter us in our efforts with the federal intervention. And we're talking about Title 18, United States Code 241.
The law Sandoval refers to as the Civil Rights Code. In addition, the attorney had a few words to say about Police Chief Charles Rodriguez, who thinks there's insufficient evidence in the case.
Regarding information that seems to be coming up.
I submit to you that, in fact, what the chief is trying to do is cover his behind. And I think it's time we make the chief accountable. Stop lying to us, Chief Rodriguez, and I'll say that emphatically.
We left a message with the chief's office, but he has been unavailable for comment.
This is News 4 San Antonio at 10.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Alan Himberger. Lori Tucker has the night off. Tonight, yet another disturbing allegation against the San Antonio Police Department. This one from a man on the south side of town who claims he was standing in his yard taking pictures of the police chase through his neighborhood and wound up getting assaulted by police when they lost their man. News 4 reporter Dan Locke has been looking into this matter, and he has the story.
Looking back on this, do you think they were mad because they lost the guy?
Yes, sir.
They didn't catch who they were looking for, so they come up here and got it out on him.
Terry Cannon ran inside and grabbed his camera and began taking these pictures. Police cars were going every which way, zipping up and down the side streets and sliding around the corners. People stood on their porches and in their front yards and just watched. Some of the police had jumped out of their cars and were chasing on foot now, chasing a man who, according to the police report, ran through the Cannons' front yard and around their house.
You never saw them chasing anybody?
No, I never seen them chasing.
Nobody else came through your running through your yard?
No.
They just came in this yard, I guess, because I was taking pictures of them driving like maniacs up and down the road with all the kids here, you know, in the streets. You can see in the pictures, you know.
Did they ever try to get the camera or the film?
Well, once I hit his hands away, then he started choking me. And then I hit his hands away again, twice. And then this time, I held him behind me like that, and I just hold him and said, look, I'm injured. You ain't even supposed to be in my yard. And he didn't even tell me why he was here. And then the other ones jumped on my back.
So they had Terry on the ground. You were yelling at them to stop.
Right.
And the police officer turned around and shoved you?
Yeah, he said,
Go ahead. Tell me what he said.
Tell him exactly what he said.
Move, you big fat. Are we going to take you and
handcuff you? We're going to
handcuff
you too.
Handcuff you too. I was very nervous and scared.
Now, it says in that police report that somebody was hitting or kicking the police officer. Did you ever touch them?
Nobody touched them.
Terry's brothers didn't.
One was way over here and one was on the other side of the fence.
Both sides.
And they couldn't do nothing. What could they do with all them men here with them sticks in their hands?
They went to the police department, to Internal Affairs, and filed a complaint. Now they wonder if that wasn't a mistake. They got nowhere with Internal Affairs, and now they have nothing but trouble with the police. Mrs. Cannon says her family lived in this house, on this block, for more than 20 years without a bit of trouble, until this. Now, they say the police harass Terry whenever he's around.
Do you have any kind of a police record? Have you ever had any trouble with the police?
No, I haven't.
None?
No. I used to respect the law. I don't no more. You know, after this, you know, look, there's 3 cop cars right now. Now they're coming to hassle me again, I guess.
They're all against him because he's got this.
Call the police.
For what?
For disturbance here?
No.
Nobody disturbing nothing.
The Cannons say this is the kind of thing they've been going through since April. Dan Locke, News 4, San Antonio.
Now, Police Chief Rodriguez wrote a letter to the Cannons after the police investigation saying the Police Advisory Board had decided no disciplinary action should be taken against the officers. Terry Cannon, by the way, has been charged with assault by police officers. His trial is set for November. Now, Police Chief Rodriguez told News 4 tonight that he would have no comment on the matter, and furthermore, he said he doesn't even know about the complaint. Meanwhile, tonight, the chief did unveil a plan that would help members of his department get a better handle on how they're doing their jobs. Speaking to a group of business professionals, Rodriguez said a new performance evaluation would be the first such plan implemented in the San Antonio Police Department since 1981. Rodriguez said it will start on an experimental basis with an initial target group of between 150 and 200 officers.
Plain, ordinary performance evaluation that most organizations have, and what we're concerned with is determining the performance of our employees, in this case, police officers.
Rodriguez fielded several complaints about police misconduct tonight, but he says he sees no reason for a special citizens review board to hear those complaints citywide.
The first meeting was in summer of '84, and the most recent being 2 months ago or so, and the chief made one of them. It was when we opened with Chief Robinson opened the patrol over there, and what we need to try to get clear is whether or not it's going to be possible to reinforce the patrol capabilities in problem areas in the near east side neighborhoods where we've had some problems. Now, part of it, I guess, is going to be answered by the 19-member assignable team that can move from area to area. And, Joe, that might be part of the answer. They're going to create a 19-member team that can move to where there are establishable hot spots. And right now, what the manager talks about is the Palo Alto area is one, but clearly this area that East Side Alliance was talking about would be another. But the other thing is just to reinforce the patrol capabilities in the existing patrols with people.
We're adding 66 officers, is that correct?
That's
total.
That's the total, yes, sir.
Okay, and it points out, Mayor, what the positions all go for, but they don't say anything about that particular
no, it doesn't.
Protection.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't point it out, and apparently if it doesn't point it out, I was on the assumption that it's not there. And right, and it's a very large number we're roped in, so I want to be roped out and get these positions that we promised the people that was feasible, and I think we need to cipher it out of these numbers that we've projected here, Mayor, and that's the only way I know, with our commitment on the line, is that these will be forthcoming. How can we redesignate or refine this where it could
Chief, you understand the problem. And the question is, would we be able to take out of that 19-member hotshot operation some emphasis on the East Side problem so we could tell the people that we were dealing with that problem that we promised to deal with?
I think.
Secondly, would we be able to do it out of our regular patrol capabilities? And thirdly, is there any other way, either reorganizing some of those patrols on the east side so we actually get more people, or is there any other way we can deal with the problem that you and I have walked through the neighborhood and saw and such?
I think what's going to happen here, and what has been happening, Mayor, is that we have already, to a great extent, committed additional resources to the east side, especially when we were meeting with the East Side Alliance. I think we've been doing that. I can't say that we've added 10 more, but we can say that we've added some people because of the need. The other part of this is that I don't know if we can assign 10 additional officers to the east side. However, to offset that, is keep in mind that if that area is having a tremendous problem, the rope program is going to address that.
And also the 19 hotshot.
And then, in addition to that, when we are having specific problems in and around any particular area, that special enforcement section that we're going to create, that is a group of uniformed officers that will be assigned only to deal with special problems, will be committed wherever necessary. If we're having a tremendous problem in the east side, then we will assign these people there, and they will stay there until we clean it up. If then
Those problems do exist.
Oh, yes.
Right
Yeah,
now,
yes,
and
they
you
do.
already know
Right.
that. Yeah.
So, and then what will happen is we would have this as a mobile force that would be able to be moved around. That in conjunction with dealing with the career criminal or the repeat offender, I think is going to make a tremendous impact on the east side, on the west side, throughout the city. There's no doubt in my mind about that. We'd have a little difficulty in assigning 10 people to the east side right about this time. Eventually, when we get to the point where we can have those extra men, those extra patrolmen, we can do that. Our statistics don't back up the need for 10 additional officers on the east side at this time.
How many does your
I couldn't tell you for sure, several, I'm sure, a couple. But I think we're going to find, as soon as we get the road program in and the special enforcement unit, those figures are going to go down.
Well, obviously, we're adding quite a bit of manpower to our police department in order to make sure that it's a sound one, and it already is, and so this gives us much more coverage, and I can understand that. I'm also concerned about the numbers that this reduces as a result of annexation, and can you address the fact that you've changed the districts in such a manner that they address those newly annexed areas, and that it did not dilute?
Our concern is to try to maintain the existing districts or sections so that we don't dilute anything. Keep in mind that we're probably going to realize at least 28 new positions in the field. Keep in mind that we are going to put some civilians, we're going to civilianize some positions, and we're going to put those people in the field. So we will realize about 28 positions in the field, and we're going to be able to deploy
Chief,
those.
excuse me for interrupting. The reassignment process that you're developing by making those civilian positions inside will go out to the
In the
field.
patrol,
That's 28.
right.
Can we say that plus an additional 66 that would be in the field?
Yes, we can say
In
that.
other words, that would give us a total of something like 94 additional officers on the street?
No.
No?
It'll give us a total of about 66 altogether.
So these 28 are included
right.
in the 66?
But you see, the 28 will be put out into the regular patrol and so forth, and in the special unit.
So the magic number is 66 in the field? That's
yes,
what I'm trying
yes,
to get.
including, yes.
That is what I was trying to get. So if we've got 66 additional people out in the field, obviously then that will impact the east side.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Yes, it will.
to take care of those particular areas that we have identified to you.
Absolutely,
problem areas.
Listen, I've talked to the East Side Alliance, and I know they're there, and we're still helping them out, yes.
Let me bring up another one of my long-term projects, if I can. Last week we talked about the library, and I've got another thing I want to mention today. One of the things I'd like to see us do during 1985 is and it won't be. Just got to get all of these things out of my system.
Easy now.
No. This is not going to surprise you. We need to begin planning for better physical sighting of our police training facilities and police academy operations. I think we have a problem in stuffing the police academy into the police operations building. And the truth of the matter is that we don't do as good a job as we should with giving them the full range of what a training facility ought to offer. Now, there's several approaches to this. First of all, I'm not asking for any capital expenditures this year. But I do think that what we ought to, or out of this money, but what I do think we ought to do is we ought to begin to think about the soft side of it, the software side of it. In other words, how do we, the planning process, if you will. We ought to put enough money in this budget to plan such a move. Now, people talk to me all times about public investment in South Side development, and I think this ought to be a South Side facility. First of all, because the land ought to be available at reasonable rates, but also because we can make a contribution by putting together a first-class municipal facility. One possibility would be, for example, adjacent to the A&M Training Center in the South Press area where we have land in that industrial park, and it's near the driving facility on Brooks Air Force Base that we now use. Another possibility would be in the area of the Palo Alto Junior College where the officers take the courses. So many of our officers are taking courses already, and we could just have the junior college, which is already accredited to teach criminology and criminal justice programs, offer some courses, and we could save some money by not having to have uniformed personnel teaching those courses because we could have them contracted to the junior college. Those are two possibilities. There's also other possibilities that are even less expensive. Taking schools, for example, in the San Antonio School District, which are not fully staffed any longer, and using their, not only the buildings, but their physical facilities as well. I think what we need is a track for running, an obstacle course in the center of the track, weight rooms for physical workout, and we need then, of course, classroom space, storerooms, lockers, and I don't know that we need a firing range in the training facility, but it makes sense. I don't think we can amass enough land to do the driving facility there, and we have Brooks Air Force Base that we're using now anyway, and that's good enough. But I do think that we need to begin thinking about the software planning of it, an RFP for design, et cetera, so that in a future bond issue we can ask the people for building a first-rate police academy. And I think we've now grown to the point where we are crowded in that facility, and where if we're going to produce the kind of officers that we're going to be producing, we ought to provide a first-quality environment. Now, I would say further that I think we can help pay for it by configuring it in such a way that it's not just the San Antonio Police Academy, but it's the regional police academy. In North Texas, up in the Dallas area, they have created a regional police academy that trains all of the suburban police officers, all of the sheriff's officers, etc. And we don't have to train sheriff's people with our own, but a high-quality, esprit de corps, professional, law enforcement academy with our police officers in there, Seguin, New Braunfels, Carrizo Springs, whoever wants to send their people to another class for suburban and outlying classes, and whoever wants to send their people from the sheriff's operations all over these counties all around us, including this one, might be a way to contract so that we could help pay for the facility out of the contracts that they pay us for the training, and we help share the overhead and pay for the facility. So that's just an idea, but I think it's something we're going to have to do. It's a good one.
Mayor, if I could add to that, I agree that we need a new facility or at least some modification. One thing I would suggest...
Did you like the idea?
Well, we don't need to hire a planner. He laid it all out for us, and
the only thing left
save a little
is
money.
site selection. I think A&M.
That's right. Well, we've got it close. The only thing I would suggest is that this would be a good project for the city and the Police Officers Association to work on together. I talked to Sergeant Rudewick before he left the presidency of the union, and suggested to him that this may be an opportunity to go into the community and solicit support from people who obviously support the activities of the San Antonio Police Department. And I'm sure that there would be some willing donors to provide gifts, if you will. There are some old schools that could be renovated and retrofitted. That's right. And make an excellent facility. So I'd like to work on that. I'd like to personally work on it and work with the chief.
We need to roll, $30,000 or $50,000 in this budget for the planning activity, which I might envision that you would need. I mean, I can envision you got to plan a program, you got to plan an investigation of sites, and you got to plan reconfiguration of the site you choose. In other words, a land use plan for the site. And all of that would be preparatory to any capital funding I, for one, would like to see you make sure that that money's in there so we don't waste a whole year without the money.
I think we just thought about it about 5 minutes ago.
No, I
mean 3 minutes ago.
5 years ago.
Who's going to run it?
We'll have
the
briefing attorney help them on
It's not going to take us a year. We're going to get hot on that. I think that's an excellent idea. Excellent.
I agree.
I think
Don't
Mr.
you like
Donna-
the site I chose, Chief?
Which site was that, Ms. Dubin? I didn't hear you.
I go with
Next to
that.
A&M and you're in my district.
I didn't quite hear you.
Well, there's a lot of sites. You know, we own land over on Culebra, where we have our present training
Watch it,
operation,
John.
with a track there, which belongs to the Northside School District. There's a lot of sites. You know, I'm not going to try to pre-choose a site, although I did say I think it ought to be a south side site, so that we can amass the proper block of land at the proper price.
We'll get right on it.
Maria Berisau.
All of the property just went up.
El Departamento de Policía empezará a realizar una evaluación de los trabajos que desempeñan los empleados de dicho departamento. El jefe de la Policía de San Antonio, Charles Rodríguez, dice que en la fase experimental se evaluarán a cerca de 200 oficiales y agregó que a los empleados de su departamento no se les ha evaluado desde 1981.
Primeramente experimental son como unos 200, unos 50, 200 patrulleros.
Y después se piensa hacer para todo el
Para todo el departamento lo que va a pasar es los supervisores, los sargentos van a evaluar a los patrulleros, los tenientes van a evaluar a los sargentos, los capitanes a los tenientes y así sube hasta arriba.
El jefe Rodríguez agregó que si el programa es exitoso, continuará realizándose para evaluar a todo el personal del Departamento de la Policía y se llevará a cabo año con año.
Eyewitness News, San Antonio's top-rated newscast.
Several crimes committed in the San Antonio area recently have been linked to people who have a record of mental instability. Well, during a news conference today, Police Chief Charles Rodriguez admitted his department has a need for tracing such potential criminals after they've been released from mental institutions. But he says a computer system that could pinpoint the mentally ill who may pose a threat to society would only be effective if the subject's name was known first.
Only if it comes to our attention that there is an individual living at a particular place that is a problem to us in terms of mental problems, and we put out that information ahead of time based on either reports or complaints. Then we can react to it in that manner. But see, that takes monitoring and then collecting information and putting it into the report. Yeah.
Rodriguez says such computer systems are being used in other cities, and San Antonio police are considering the same approach.
Y las investigaciones continúan en el caso de la señora Teresa González, la cual fue encontrada muerta en su residencia el pasado lunes. Con este motivo, esta mañana el jefe de la policía, Charles Rodríguez, ofreció una conferencia de prensa en la que se informó que el arma con la que se dio muerte a la señora González fue encontrada en la casa del principal sospechoso Tim McNeil, quien posteriormente confesó el asesinato de la señora en este caso.
Encontramos la navaja que usó el muchacho McNeil contra la señora que mató, y aquí lo tenemos en la estación, pero no estamos seguros y no hemos hallado que esa fue la navaja que se usó contra la muchachita, la niña Garza.
Hasta el momento no se ha podido comprobar que esta arma sea la misma que ocasionó la muerte de la niña Rosie Garza.
Eyewitness News, San Antonio's top-rated newscast.
The two seem to go hand in hand, accidents and lawsuits, and last week's Via bus crash is no exception. A woman injured in the accident filed a lawsuit against Via today, claiming the company was negligent. Sylvia Tamayo's suit also names Ronald Ennis, the man accused of stealing the bus and crashing it into several vehicles. Tamayo was in one of the cars.
Individual to obtain possession of the bus. It's happened before, and they should have taken steps to eliminate this from ever happening again.
Are you suggesting they have an armed guard in the bus, or what?
Well, we feel like that's up to them as to remedy the situation. We're not here to tell them how to prevent this. The point is they were negligent, and there are ways to prevent this from occurring.
Tamayo wasn't seriously injured. She is asking for $100,000 from Villa, $150,000 from Ennis. Ennis remains in the psychiatric ward of the county jail tonight. He reportedly spent some time in a hospital psychiatric ward a few days before the Villa incident. Today, Police Chief Charles Rodriguez admitted there is a need for keeping track of some people after they're released from mental institutions. Some cities use a computer system to pinpoint potential criminals who may pose a threat to society. Rodriguez says that's not always valid, though.
Only if it comes to our attention that there is an individual living at a particular place that is a problem to us in terms of mental problems, and we put out that information ahead of time based on either reports or complaints. Then we can react to it in that manner. But see, that takes monitoring and then collecting information and putting it into a report. Yeah.
Rodriguez says the department is looking at a number of solutions, including that computer system.
This is News 4 San Antonio at 5.
One of the detectives in that new rope unit and a homicide detective today were personally congratulated by the chief for a job well done. Detectives Richard Urbanek and Jimmy Holguin were commended by Chief Rodriguez for their hard work leading to the arrest of a suspect in the murder of 13-year-old Rosie Garza. Both officers say they are relieved the 4-month investigation is over.
We had many calls from people out there thanking us and congratulating us. One of the calls was from a lady that said her prayers had been answered.
Last Friday night, Holguin and Urbanek arrested 26-year-old Jimmy Hendrickson on capital murder charges. The suspect was a neighbor of the young girl. Back in June, Rosie Garza found stabbed to death in her northeast side home. Urbanek, who transferred to the rope unit last month, continued to work with Holguin on the case.
Eyewitness News, San Antonio's top-rated newscast.
San Antonio Police Chief Charles Rodriguez today praised the 2 homicide detectives who broke the Rosie Garza murder case last Friday night. The chief publicly acknowledged detectives Richard Urbanek and James Holguin at a news conference this morning. Urbanek led the investigation into the murder of the 13-year-old girl in a northeast side home since it occurred on June 12th. When Urbanek was transferred to the Repeat Offenders Project, Holguin headed the search for Garza's murderer. 26-year-old James Hendrickson, Garza's next-door neighbor, was arrested last Friday and charged with murdering the teenager.
Serving San Antonio and South Texas.
2 San Antonio police detectives are being recognized for their work in solving the Rosie Garza murder. Detectives Richard Urbanek and Jimmy Holguin were congratulated by Chief Charles Rodriguez today at a news conference. Urbanek had worked practically full-time on the murder of the 13-year-old up until his recent transfer to the Repeat Offender Project. Holguin took over at the case after that and last Friday night arrested the teenager's next-door neighbor.
We had many calls from people out there thanking us and congratulating us. One of the calls was from a lady that said her prayers had been answered. And she said this because she prayed that God would guide us through the investigation. I believe this was true.
Rosie Garza was brutally stabbed to death in her home last June 12th.